Good evening. Y'all, thank you so much for coming out this evening. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Master Naturalists of Central Arkansas. And we're so delighted to be hosting it here at Second Presbyterian Church. So on behalf of our environmental stewardship ministry here at the church, a formal welcome. We're so glad that you're here, and we're so happy to be partnering with Ozark Society and CAM tonight. A couple of housekeeping things. If you finished your pizza and you've got a paper plate or something to discard, Rick and I are going to take those home and compost them, so you can pile them on the table over there. There's also a pile going over here, so feel free to put those there. If you need some water or anything like that, we have in our little kitchenette here behind in the back of the room, there are some mugs. You can feel free to pop up as needed and get some water. If you want to refill your water bottle, we have a bottle filler just past this little entryway here to the left across from the women's restroom. If you need the men's restroom, it's down on the other side of the sanctuary doors, and you'll see that there on the right after you pass that set of doors. Any other questions before I get started? Did everybody get a door prize ticket? Oh, one more. Gosh, just two, Nikki. She's doing her job. Oh, maybe three. Okay, excellent. Y'all, thank you so much. We have a wonderful set of door prizes. You may have seen these as you came in. So, I think the odds of winning are very good. So we have so many, fortunately. So good luck to you all. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Milam, who's going to get us started.
Good evening. Thanks for coming. We are excited to be here tonight and talk to you about monarchs, the monarch migration, and our trip to Mexico to see them in their overwintering sites. So I'm Debbie Milam. Lynn Foster will be talking to you. That was Ann Owens. She'll be talking to you, and Kathy Boone. So the four of us went on the trip in December. So we traveled to the forested Central Highlands of Mexico to experience one of the world's most astounding wildlife events, and it delivered. It definitely is, and I know some of you have been, and some of you have seen the monarchs overwintering in California, and it's really amazing. So our outline tonight, we're going to do life cycle and biology. Light on the biology, but big on the life cycle. I'm doing that piece. Lynn is going to do the monarch migration. Ann's going to talk to you about our trip. And then Kathy's going to talk about the area economy and the challenges to the monarch's home. So with that, we'll get started. So this is the monarch life cycle. I think, you probably know it. The egg, the larva, the instars, and there are 5 of those, the pupa or the chrysalis, the adult butterfly. And so we're going to go through that and talk about it. So this is a monarch egg. And of course, when you have them in your yard, they're so small you probably don't even see them unless you're out there with a magnifying glass looking for them. But this is maybe some 101 stuff, but they're laid on milkweed, because that's the host plant for monarchs. If you find eggs on another plant, they're not monarch eggs. So they only eat milkweed. The monarch's going to remain in that egg stage for 3 to 5 days, depending on how hot it is outside. So you can find those eggs on buds, stems, leaves, even seed pods of the milkweed. But usually they're on the underside of a leaf. Now you can find sap dollops, which are little latex drops that are secreted by damaged leaves. You can find those in the leaves sometimes, and they can be mistaken for eggs, but they're just lit round and white. They don't have those striations on them there that you see on this egg. So that's when you have to have the magnifying glass out, or just wait and see if a caterpillar comes out. Then you'll know what you got.
From the Zoom crowd, can you please put this in presentation mode?
Okay, can we please put this in presentation mode? Whoever is gonna work this. Poor Steve. You don't want me to mess with it.
What's the problem?
Zoom, said, please put it in presentation mode.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then they don't see the notes and stuff. Maybe a song and dance now, or if I had worn my butterfly wings that I have, or I wear them. at
How's that?
night, Then, except we don't have a screen.
That's it, thank you.
We don't have the screen. Oh, it's searching.
It'll catch up.
Okay, good. I don't have to try to entertain you then. Oh, okay. Let's see, what else could I tell you about that? Okay, so on the next slide, I'm gonna talk to you about the instars that the larvae go through. So I bet some of you know about them, some don't, but they're 5 instars. And they start off, I mean, they are so tiny, you won't even see them. So people don't usually know that they have been visited by a monarch when the first instar comes out. And I'll show you a picture of that as soon as we get the pictures back up. There we go.
About our Zoom people, does it still look like you want it? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. Oh, okay, so we're gonna talk about the caterpillars for a minute. So I told you that they feed only on milkweed. They will be on your milkweed plant about 2 weeks. It takes them about that long to go through the 5 instars. So they'll be in each instar 3-4 days. They eat almost constantly, but you don't really notice that until 4th and for sure the 5th instar when they're eating a lot. And so if they eat a lot, then they also leave, I'm not sure what larvae poop is called, but they will frat. They will leave frat all over your plants. You'll find it, you'll know they're there if you haven't seen them. So they pause from eating only long enough to shed their skin. And that period between shedding of the skin or molting is called an instar. So this photo has 5 larvae on it. The smallest one is probably a young second instar and not a first instar, and I'll tell you why. On the first instar, it's tiny. It has a black head. It has tentacles that are just barely visible and no stripes when they first hatch. So this one has hatched maybe 3 or 4 days ago and is just about to molt into second instar. They don't start getting their stripes until they start eating the milkweed. And at this stage, the first instar, they are probably only eating the hairs off the leaf. So you wouldn't find holes in your leaf at that point. Now, a few days later, it's gonna molt into a second instar. And so that second instar has visible yellow and black stripes. The tentacles on the front are visible, but they're really small. And so you can see them there on that one. You can start now to see small holes in the milkweed leaves because they're starting to get bigger and chewing more. So a few days later, that one's gonna molt into the third instar. Now you're gonna see bigger chew holes, often on the edge of the leaves. So you'll see holes, little mouthfuls taken out of those leaves. And the tentacles on the front would reach to the front of the caterpillar's head if you bent them forward, but I don't recommend trying that. But just so you know about the length there, and if you're trying to decide which instar they're in, I never worry about that. When they get to be the fifth instars, when I really get involved with them. A few days later, that third instar is gonna molt into the fourth instar. Now the head's gonna have a bold yellow stripe that's visible. The tentacles on the front are gonna reach past the head. I don't have a pointer, but you can see here how long those tentacles are on its head. And this is when you usually start to see them. So then again, in a few days later, they are gonna molt again and into the fifth instar. Now with the fifth, the front tentacles reach way past the head and they're droopy often, and those are droopy on that one. The fifth instar caterpillars are the biggest eaters. In fact, they eat nonstop. And they often will go down and they'll notch the base of the leaf on your milkweed. And that is to stop the flow of the milk sap. And then they'll turn around, go back to the top and start eating from the tip to the base of the leaf. And so then you know you've got caterpillars because you'll go out there and your plant is being eaten. Of course, that's what we want when we plant milkweed. We want our plants to be eaten. So caterpillars, monarch caterpillars, do leave their milkweed plants. I didn't know this the first season I had them, and I would put them back on. The milkweed plant, and I would find them. I'd be like, this poor little caterpillar is lost. They're not lost. They know what they're doing. So the smaller ones might leave to self-regulate their body heat. If they get too hot, they may crawl away to some shade to cool down, and then they'll go back to the milkweed. The fifth instars leave because they're looking for a place to form their chrysalis. So they can form it and will sometimes form it on milkweed, but I believe they prefer, and because they almost always leave the milkweed to form their chrysalis. And so you'll see photos where the chrysalis will be right beside the milkweed. And then I've heard lots of people say they found one 50 feet away. So if you're like super enthusiastic about monarchs, like I know some of you out in the audience are, because we talk about it, I mean, you'll be like me, like I'm going around looking everywhere that I think there might be a chrysalis. But I've not found one 50 feet away, but I'm hoping someday that I'll have one that wants to travel that far. So they crawl away to make their chrysalis, and this is a photo of a chrysalis or a pupa. The fifth instar has found themselves a secure location. They're gonna form a silk pad. They're gonna hang upside down in a J shape. So you may have seen photos of that, of this big monarch caterpillar hanging in a J shape. And once it's got its silk pad spun and it's hanging, it will shed its skin one last time. It'll just split open, and then this green pupa comes out. It was always inside the caterpillar. And so if you can watch that process, or you can Google and find some YouTubes and watch it. It is so fascinating. So that bright green chrysalis is gonna hang there for 8 to 15 days. Again, it's weather dependent. And then an adult will emerge, and we're gonna go over the pumping its wings and drying. So these are, it's hard to see, but the little rims there, they're gold. And so oftentimes I'll just be walking by and something will catch my eye, the sun's shining on it. So it's a beautiful shade of green, and the gold on it is beautiful. So right before the monarch closes, it looks like this. And the only, well, not the only thing, but what has changed is that the monarch its pigment has now developed. So if you look at the green ones, you can actually see wings, but they're not orange and black, so it's very hard to see them. So the chrysalis didn't change colors, the monarch changed colors. And now you can see it. And so when you see one of these on your milkweed, then it is time to set up the lawn chair and the camera and get ready and watch. So this is, again, an amazing thing. And that pigment forms the last 24 hours before the monarchy closes. There's a photo, kind of a time lapse of an enclosure. And so you see the monarch, when it comes out, it doesn't look like a healthy monarch, but it is probably. So don't think, oh, I have a monarch that it's not gonna fly. It's going to hang there and pump its abdomen, which is gonna pump fluid into its wings, and then they're gonna fill out, and then it's gonna hang while its wings dry. And that's gonna take 3 to 5 hours for the wings to straighten and dry. It's really vulnerable right then because it can't fly. So you may see that, and that's a fun thing to watch too. So male or female, if you're trying to figure out if you might be having someone lay eggs. The males have the black spot on either side of the abdomen on the lower wing. And a lot of butterflies, those are related to mating. But in monarchs, they don't think that they play a role in the mating. So it is a very good way to figure out if you got a male or female out there though. And then the adult monarchs need nectar. So the caterpillars need a milkweed, the adults need nectar. So we've got to plant spring, summer, fall nectar sources for them. Without enough milkweed or nectar, we're not going to have a healthy generation of monarchs. An adult monarch can lay 300 to 500 eggs. She's evolved to lay that many because only 2 to 5% of the eggs make it to adulthood. So they have the eggs and the tiny little instars have a lot of predators, wasps, spiders, stink bugs, even ladybugs are some of the predators that can eat them. So with that, that is the monarch life cycle. And I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Foster to talk to you about the next step.
Hi, everybody. I want to echo what Debbie said about this being one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. It's an experience I'll always remember. And just out of curiosity, how many of you have gone to Mexico and seen the overwintering monarchs? Anybody? Okay. How about California? How many of you have seen them overwinter in California? Okay, great. Well, how about Oklahoma? Overwinter in Oklahoma?
We have a small acreage where we get horses. And there's been a nursery, so there were a lot of trees. And I happened to walk by there as a teenager. And I thought that this is crazy because all the leaves have already turned brown. There's not absolutely thousands of monarchs.
Okay, we have a report of overwintering monarchs in Oklahoma here, so you should write that up. Okay.
I mean, it was a fiction,
Yeah.
fictions.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the unique things about monarch butterflies is that they'll go through several generations in a year, and there's a huge difference between the 4th generation and the other generation. So let's just talk about that for a second. So typically when we talk about monarchs, and we talk about generation one, that's the generation that's born outside of Mexico in the United States by monarchs who have exited Mexico in the early spring. So generation one migrates, but only one way. These monarchs in generation one are only gonna live 2 to 6 weeks as adults. And they're heading north, they're heading northeast, from Texas, maybe Louisiana as well. There's still a lot of mysteries. And also one thing to bear in mind when I talk to you about migration is that these are only the most general of statements. There are many, many exceptions. And I'll say a little bit about that as we go too. So generation two, then is going to be born further to the north, further to the northeast. And they too are only going to live 2 to 6 weeks as adults. And some of them may continue to move north. Others, when their eggs hatch, generation three, some of them will migrate south to Mexico. But most of them, well, I'm not even gonna say most of them, but some of them won't. Some of them will produce one more generation. And something to note is that if a monarch does reproduce, even though it starts out from Mexico, it's probably not gonna get there because reproduction takes so much energy out of the monarch. So then finally, we have the generation four, and sometimes it's generation five. And I found something on the internet actually about generation six, maybe. So especially for monarchs born in the South, like we are in the South here in Arkansas. So this generation is born in reproductive diapause, and they head south, and they get down to Mexico, hopefully. And then they are going to turn around and leave Mexico in the spring and come back up north. So whereas the overwintering generations live only 2 to 6 weeks as adults, the overwintering generation lives 8 to 9 months as an adult, and not only goes into Mexico, but comes back out of Mexico in the spring, if they're lucky. So a fascinating, really fascinating difference between the generations. Now, if you read the stuff on the internet, 99% of what you read is going to say that those next to last generations, like the third generation, is up in Canada and it's coming back down from Canada or maybe New York. But those of us who live here in Arkansas, we know that we see monarchs hatching in August. So what's up with that? All right. And so I'm going to quote Chip Taylor here. He was the director of Monarch Watch. I think he retired last year. And here is his comment, quote, "It can be very confusing, and there is a lot of misinformation about these patterns of migrations and generations in documentaries about monarchs and on many websites." And then he goes on to say, "Are there 5th and 6th generation migrants from the southern United States? Probably, but it's complicated and the numbers are likely few. To explain what might be happening, we have to consider the extent to which there are continuously breeding populations in the South and the impact of the midsummer migrants. There appear to be habitat islands associated with major cities where monarchs survive in low numbers through the summer. It's conceivable that some of these lineages produce 5th and 6th generation migrants. However, the biggest number of migrants originating from the South in September and October are probably progeny of midsummer migrants that were 3rd generation butterflies." So in other words, what he says is the monarchs that we see that are born here in late summer are still 4th generation monarchs. If this is indeed the case, then most of the monarchs originating from the South are 4th generation rather than 5th generation. So there are monarchs that overwinter in the southern United States, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida. There are monarchs in the western population that sometimes cross over the Rockies and head down to Mexico. So there are lots of exceptions to these general rules, but but I'm gonna give you the general rules tonight. So. And I'm also going to talk, if this slide will advance, which it apparently won't do.
Battery's low.
Oh, it needs to be plugged in.
Mhm.
Duh. Take a short intermission while we plug in this computer.
It looks like, oh,
There's a request for the speaker to speak closer to the mic because she's hard to hear.
From milkweed in your.
Sorry, we lost power.
Excellent, excellent. How many of you have seen eggs in your yard or in anywhere?
This year?
This year, yeah, not yet, but you had,
I can't find her eggs, so I thought she was laying eggs.
oh, they have caterpillars at the children's library.
Oh.
The librarian there sent me photos today. Yes. Good news. So at this point, what I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit of a break from monarchs and more of a discussion about science and scientific discoveries and how they occur. Because to me, the discovery of the overwintering spot of the monarchs is one of the great naturalist discoveries of the last 50 years, actually. It occurred in 1975, so it's just about 50 years old now. And it's a fascinating story, and most versions of the story, I believe, are not particularly truthful. So I thought I would share with you some of the details that I ran across when I was doing research for this presentation. I owe you one.
I think we're good. I think.
Are we good, everybody?
Does everyone see the PowerPoint again?
Yes, but please speak into the microphone, please.
I'm doing that, so thank you. All right. So, now let's see if this works. No, still not working. So,
Let me see.
okay, sometimes it's the computer.
Yeah, it's not being too happy, is it?
That's the trouble with PowerPoint and Zoom, in my opinion.
And yours just froze up. Yeah, your laptop's froze. Yeah, everyone, I think we're gonna have another brief break.
What's the problem?
You're partially frozen.
What?
You're partially frozen.
Okay.
Guys, we're gonna do a quick door
That
prize.
almost
so-
never happens.
I'm trying to. There we go.
All right, I'm gonna read the last three digits.
See, I'm clicking.
It's 780.
You're left-handed, I forgot.
780. Yep, you get to pick which item that you would like, so, we have 4, gift certificates to Prairie Moon Nursery, wonderful native plant nursery. We have a number of books, we have note cards, milkweed, sign, not spraying, mosquitoes, and they'll take your pick.
The PowerPoint isn't running. I can get PowerPoint running again.
Okay, so. There you
Let's
go.
do one more while we're at it. How about ticket 745? You were like, hello. You did some repetitive too, that actually-
Okay, so,
For that, but it's not shared yet.
okay. We're halfway there, hopefully.
Hey, do y'all see presentation view on Zoom?
Yes.
All right, try your clicker.
773.
Can I not just, can we not just try this?
You can use your
Okay.
left and right arrow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're on. You want the sign? I want the sign, so coveted sign. I know, I'm seeing them around town, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks to Debbie and Gail. People win. You ready? Okay, right, yeah.
Thank you. This is so embarrassing. Okay, everybody ready? All right. So, let's go back in time to say the 1940s, 1950s. We know that monarch butterflies can't overwinter in the north, and by that we mean north of here, north of Florida, you know, north of the Mason-Dixon line, maybe, in any form. But as Europeans moved west in California, people noticed that there were huge winter colonies of monarchs there, okay? And then people figured out that those were the western monarchs, those were west of the Rockies. But what about the eastern monarchs? And so today, we meaning Americans, know that the monarchs, well, sorry, no, I'm moving ahead of myself. Down in Mexico, what people knew was that monarchs began to arrive around the Day of the Dead, November 1st, November 2nd, in the Sierra Madre mountain area. And in fact, Homero Aridis, a famous Mexican poet and novelist who grew up in that area, used to see the monarchs when he was young. And he wrote about them, about how the autumn wind bore currents of butterflies to the forest in the 1940s and 1950s. So there were lots of people who knew where the monarchs were overwintering, but we up here did not know. And so when you read materials, you'll see phrases like, it was not known where the monarchs overwintered. Well, some people knew, just not us. So it was not known. So up in Canada, a doctor, Fred Urquhart, who had apparently always wondered since he was a child, and I say this because there is actually a film about him and his wife and monarchs. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. He always wondered where they went. And so when he grew up and became a zoologist and married his wife, not a doctor, Nora, he started to investigate this issue. And over time, he started in the 1950s, and this was a project that took him about 20 years. Over time, he recruited thousands of volunteers to tag butterflies, and they experimented with tags. And he asked people to write him whenever they found a butterfly. And they theorized that the monarchs spent the winter in Mexico. And this was why, as one source puts it, the trail seemed to disappear in Texas in the late fall, only to reappear in Texas in the late spring. And so the Urquharts, and actually an interesting point, the Urquharts went on to found an organization that today is Monarch Watch, which is one of the largest and most important monarch organizations. And this is from a mural that's on the wall of a narrow passageway in Angangeo that we all visited. It's a very, very long wall, and there's a mural covering both sides, which is the history of Angangeo. And they've immortalized the Urquharts there on that wall. You can see a picture of them. So, so the Urquharts advertised in Mexican newspapers asking for helpers to go and look for the monarchs. Kenneth Brugger answered the ad. His girlfriend was Catalina Aguado. Today she goes by a different name. She remarried, and her name today is Trail. Then this is the story from the internet and the film and the National Geographic. They were both naturalists. They volunteered. They spent 2 years looking, and in 1975 found the first known wintering refuge in Michoacan, okay, which is about 100 miles northwest of Mexico City. So what I found when I was doing my extensive research for this presentation was that she did an interview with Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine in 2016. She dropped out of sight after the 1976 National Geographic article. She later divorced Brugger. He passed away in 1998. She remarried. But she came forward when they made the film. They had to find her, see if she was alive, get consent. And they actually had to hire a private detective to track her down in 2012. So she was pretty, reclusive. But they found her, and she became one of the advisors for the film. But she had a long heart-to-heart with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So I wanted to share that with you. In the film, you see two people of approximately the same age, and they're riding around on this motorcycle up in the hills. And then they lead the Urquharts there, and the Urquharts see the monarchs, and it's all wonderful. So here's her story. She met Brugger when she was 22, and he was 53. He knew nothing about butterflies and was colorblind. She had watched butterflies since childhood. And when he saw the Urquharts notice, he wanted to volunteer. She was in college at the time. She did not want to drop out of college, but eventually he talked her into it. And so in the winter of 1973, they started the search. They did get married in May of 1974. And of the searching, what she said was, we would leave at 4:30 in the morning and return after sundown. We would hide the Jeep with a camouflage sheet and get on the motorcycle. While Ken drove, I would use the binoculars to search the mountains, and their dog, Cola, sat between us. Then we would hide the motorcycle and go on foot. Most days we would walk over 11 miles. So not easy looking for monarch butterflies over the years. They searched for 2 years. They started just searching on the weekends, but then towards the end, they went every single day. The Urquharts, we decided, what the heck, no one's going to pay us. The Urquharts didn't have much money. Later, Fred did give us $1,500 and then maybe $500, but 99% of our searching was for free. Ken and I were adventurous. He was retired, and I was curious. They found the monarchs on January 2nd, 1975. And I wanted to share this with you in particular because all of us in this room tonight, I think, love nature and love all of the wildlife and plants that we see in nature. And this was just an incredible discovery. I yelled, I need the camera. I see them up here. Ken hurried up behind me and all he could say was, oh my God. From then on, there was complete silence. Neither of us could talk. I will never get over seeing so many butterflies at one time. I don't have the words to describe what I saw. My mind just went blank. Then Ken and I walked together. We kept whispering, wow, wow, wow. We didn't want to scare the monarchs in their own sanctuary. The ground was 1.5 feet deep with them. Not something we saw on our trip. They covered the tree trunks like pages of a book. We stepped carefully so as not to kill any. Awed and overwhelmed, Trial squatted down. She nudged away the monarchs, and then she sat down, and then she laid down on the ground on her back. She bent her legs up and crossed her arms across her chest, and soon monarchs covered her body. I felt their scratchy feet on my face, and I thought to myself, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Trial says. I wish everyone in the world had my eyes right now to see what I'm seeing and feel what I'm feeling, because this is so amazing. My God, you butterflies flew thousands of miles, and here you are. You see, not many people knew back then how far they flew, and some of them fly almost, I had this number written down somewhere, 2,000, 3,000 miles, huge distance. They phoned the Urquharts, who told them to, guess what? Keep it a secret. They found 5 more colonies that year, and then a year later, they led the Urquharts and a National Geographic photographer to the second found site. And in August 1976, so they would have been there the winter of 75, 76, the journal published Urquhart's report on finding monarch roosts. The 14-page spread mentioned Trial once, only once, as a bright and delightful Mexican Kathy. When the Urquharts had hired them, Bruegger told her to use the name Kathy because I guess, I don't know why. Anyway, fill in the blank as to why. So Kathy did get her picture on the cover of the National Geographic, but Urquhart's slight and the controversy, which I'll talk about in a second, that followed between him and the other monarch researchers saddened her and led to her decision to remain silent until 2012. She didn't want any part of the drama, and there was a fair amount of drama. The controversy, okay, the Urquharts refused to reveal the site to the public. And of course, you know, understandably so. But they also refused to reveal it to fellow scientists. And one in particular, Dr. Lincoln Brower, a scientist who had been researching monarchs for 22 years already, he was infuriated, and he went out and did his own detective work and found the site. And when he gets there in January 1977, who is there? The Urquharts. They're there. And so I've never seen an account of exactly what happened, but Brower, who I think survived the Urquharts, said it was not a pleasant meeting. I'm sure words were exchanged. I'm sure they didn't shake hands. And then later, Urquhart accused Brower of setting fires under the fir trees and trampling the monarchs. And so this, you know, drew a lot of ire from the scientific community and the general public going down on Brower, but he said that that's a false charge. I didn't do that. 2 things. One, it was January and the guide had started a fire because it was so cold. You're at a 10,000 foot elevation in the mountains in Mexico in January, cold up there. And 2, one thing that the Mexican farmers did do at the time was take their cattle to the overwintering spots and start fires to get the monarchs to fall to the ground so their cattle could eat them, because they're a terrific resource of protein and fat. Lots of concern after this great discovery, after it was now known, where the monarchs were overwintering. And both international and Mexican and United States groups called on the Mexican government to protect these fir groves. So in 1986, the reserve was first established and banned or limited logging in several locations. But the logging continued. And also there were lots of predictions about how the tourists were going to come in and really grow the economy. And that didn't happen. There was some tourism, but not much. And so in 2000, there was increased concern about whether this was a sustainable area for the monarchs, whether we could keep their overwintering area the way it needed to be kept. And so Mexico tripled the reserve in size to 135,000 acres. Remember that number, 135,000. And in 2008, UNESCO listed the reserve as a World Heritage Site. And so this is the reserve today. The dark green areas are the core zones, okay, where the monarchs actually overwinter. And the lighter green areas are called the buffer zone. And land use is restricted in the buffer zone, not as much as it is in the core zones, though. So this is the reserve, okay? And in the spring, well, okay, let me back up for a second here. No, it's good. Okay. So what starts monarchs off in the fall? Decreasing day length and temperature, fewer nectar resources. That's what we believe starts them on their way. And the generation that is going to overwinter is born in the condition of reproductive diapause, meaning they can't mate or lay eggs. Okay? And again, this is nature's way of getting them down to Mexico, because if they do, they won't make it. So they head down towards Mexico. They pause at sites with nectar and hospitable weather. Some monarchs fly for almost 3,000 miles and take 2 months to get there. In the spring, they will come out of diapause as they head north. Tropical milkweed also brings them out of diapause, we believe. So if a butterfly does reproduce, it won't successfully migrate and overwinter because reproduction requires a huge investment of their body and lipid reserves. So they don't live as long once they reproduce. But once they do mature and are on their way north, they'll continue to lay eggs on milkweed until they die. And those eggs that they're laying are generation 1 of the next year. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. So how do they get down to Mexico? Scientists now believe that there's been research done on this for decades, that the chief thing that monarchs use that they have is a kind of a sun compass based on a circadian clock, which is in their antennae. And for years, scientists thought that they were probably using some kind of a magnetic compass, but they couldn't find it. There was one famous experiment in 1999 where they claimed they had found it, and then they had to retract all that statements later because further experiments didn't carry it out. But now what we have apparently discovered, and this has been repeated successfully, is that there is a magnetic compass, but it's dependent on ultraviolet light, okay, which can come through cloud cover. So on days when there is no sun, they might be using this magnetic compass as well. Scientists have discovered that there are 536 genes of the monarch that are associated with migration. And migration is probably augmented by some other things. They can feel the wind and tell where the wind is coming from with the little hairs on their heads. Some evidence they can sense geologic barriers like mountain ranges, etc. And monarchs live all over the world, but the most successful migration is here between the United States, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And just in case you didn't know this or had forgotten, they smell with their antennae, like other butterflies, and they taste with their feet. So think about that for a second. All right, so they get to Mexico. What are they doing down there? They overwinter on the branches of Oyamel fir trees. And these trees cover the slopes of mountains in the Sierra Madre. They only grow at high altitudes between 8,000 and 12,000 feet above sea level. And they only grow on 12 isolated mountaintops in Mexico's transvolcanic belt. Only 2% of the original Oyamel forest is left. 98% is gone. So that's why they're only on the 12 isolated mountaintops. These trees form a microclimate that is beneficial to the monarchs, and it's particularly beneficial when winter storms come, particularly heavy rain, heavy snow. Notice the scientific name, religiosa, that comes from the fact that Mexicans use the boughs, the branches of these firs in their religious ceremonies, particularly at Christmas time. Sometimes the monarchs roost on pine trees, but they much prefer the Oyamel fir trees. And here are two photographs. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but the one on the left is when the monarchs are gone, and the one on the right is when they are in those Oyamel firs. And you can see the orange there. And so they change the color of the trees. They weigh the branches down. See some photos of that. This photo was taken by Dr. Bill Calvert after a devastating snowstorm killed 2.5 million monarchs in 1981 in the Sierra Chinqua Reserve. Overwintering is not without its perils. Butterflies can't fly if the temperature is below 55 degrees. They can't crawl if it's below 41 degrees. They're very vulnerable when they're on the ground and they're cold and they can't get back up into the trees. And a monarch who falls from a tree in the cold most likely is going to die. And that is one thing that we did see when we were up there in the mountains. Monarchs that were on the ground, either dead or dying. And just here's an example. The left is from day one. Day one, we were at El Rosario, and it was a cloudy day. Day two, we were at Sierra Chinqua, and it was a sunny day. So you can see the difference. And also on the sunny day, day two, the air was full of the butterflies because they were all flying around in the sun, not on day one. So how do they spend their time? Lounging by the beach, drinking some beers? No. On warm days, they may drink some water. They do have to have water. They're gonna definitely need it by the time they leave. So enough water is one of the climate change issues regarding monarchs. They barely eat. They're sustained by their fat that they acquired first when they were caterpillars and later when they were adults. And there's nothing to eat anyway. You know, there were a few flowers in the mountains, but not enough for millions of butterflies. On sunny, warm days, some will fly. And again, they're just as they did when they were caterpillars, they regulate their body temperatures so that they're not burning off fat too quickly. They need that fat to get back north. You read a lot about how there are few predators of monarchs, although the monarchs in my yard almost always do succumb to predators. But these are the Mexican predators at the Mexican end that are eating the adult monarchs. And there are 3 of them, and they all have black in their name. There are black-eared mice. That's a black-eared mouse. One of these mice can eat about 37 monarchs in a night. And they leave only the wings. So if you see just monarch wings, a black-eared mouse has been there. Another predator is the black-backed oriole, and it's right in the center there. You can't see it that well. They don't eat the cuticle or outer covering of the monarch bodies where most of the toxins are stored. They slice the cuticle open with their beaks and they eat the fat inside. and I know everyone's wondering about this, so I'm just gonna tell you. A colony of 50 million butterflies contains as much fat as 1,500 pounds of butter. So, I love those statistics, I don't know about you. And the orioles eat the monarchs in the morning and evening when the butterflies are too cold to fly. And ask Debbie because she saw monarchs being eaten while she was out there on day 3. The rest of us did not go out on day 3. Day 2 had been perfect. We didn't want to ruin it, so we stayed at the bottom of the mountain, I have to confess. Okay, and then the last predator is black-headed grosbeaks, and they only eat the abdomen of the butterfly. They do eat the cuticle, but they only eat males. And the males have 30% less toxins than the females have. And just all told, among these 3 different types of predators, some scientists estimate that predators eat 15% of the overwintering monarchs. So, how are we doing right now, these monarchs? Well, in 2023-24, as usual, researchers went out and did the count. They count every 2 weeks while the monarchs are there, but it's the last count in December that is used as the comparative figure. And so the figure they came up with was that they found 9 colonies occupying 2.2 acres. And how big is the reserve? 135,000 acres. And the monarchs occupied 2.2 acres. I live on some land northwest of Pinnacle. I live on 2.5 acres. Sometimes I think about what it would be like to have not even that covered by all the overwintering monarchs from this last winter. And this quote was from the new director of Monarch Watch. The numbers are so low that few monarchs will be seen this coming summer in many parts of the US and Canada. This is the 2nd lowest ever count. So, that's the bar graph published by World Wildlife Fund, and you can see, not good. So, what are the causes of monarch decline? I think we probably all know what they are. Herbicide use is killing milkweed. Dicamba is one of those. It's heavily used in eastern Arkansas right now, as well as in a lot of other places. Land use change. Farmers are plowing up the borders of their fields where milkweed used to go and replacing those with crops. Developers are creating new subdivisions every day and digging up all of the native vegetation to replace it with turf grass and houses. In Mexico, there are challenges to the forest as well. Kathy's going to talk about those. Climate change, probably most specifically with climate change, we have seemed to have had more severe storms down there, as well as snowstorms that stayed cold for days. And if it just snows, but then it warms up again, usually the monarchs can recover pretty well, but if it snows and then stays cold, that's probably a lot will die. And drought conditions, all of the monarchs passing down through that funnel, Oklahoma, Texas, Mexico, all of that was under a bad drought. So there was much reduced nectar. So what can we do? We can create habitat. We can plant more native milkweed, but it's not just milkweed that monarchs need. They also need nectar producing plants for their adult lives when they are migrating up north, and especially in the fall when they come back down and they're on their way to Mexico. Don't plant tropical milkweed. It's not native here, and it's not good for the migrating monarchs. Never forget the first summer that I was a master naturalist and I was going to plant some milkweed in my yard and get some monarchs. And I went to a plant store in town, a retail plant seller, and said, I need some native milkweed, and they sold me some tropical milkweed. So watch out for that. Support native plant sellers. And let me just put in a plug for the Cal sale at the Children's Library, 4800 West 10th Street, on Saturday, April 27th, from 10 to 1. How many of you ordered from Audubon? Excellent. Well, maybe you didn't get the plants you wanted from Audubon this year. I know I wanted Mayapple, and I think they sold out of Mayapple during the first 10 minutes. So there will be 7 or 8 local plant sellers with hundreds of native plants for sale at the Cal's sale. And probably more milkweed species than Audubon sold this year. I think Audubon only sold 3 species. Pretty sure there's gonna be more than that at the milkweed sale, at the Cal sale. So do go to that. It's on Facebook. Don't spray pesticides. Pesticides are just death for insects. And in 2022, Xerces released the results of a study. Their researchers took 235 milkweed plant samples from retail nurseries in 15 states across the United States. And they found in those leaves sold by retail nurseries, retail growers like Home Depot, Lowe's, they found 61 pesticides with an average of 12 pesticides in each plant. And the most they found in any one plant was 28 different pesticides. So buy your native plants from our native plant sellers. Do not take the risk that you're going to get a plant that has been exposed to some kind of a systemic pesticide. I talked to a grower last year who sells to the retailers, and every plant that he sells has been drenched with a systemic pesticide. It was his position that if he's going to grow plants in greenhouses in Arkansas, he cannot do that without using those pesticides. Now, the native plant growers don't do that. They don't expose their plants to pesticides like the neonicotinoids and the other really deadly pesticides. So be careful. There's a bill in Congress. It would be nice if it passed. I'm not holding my breath. Encourage public land managers to plant monarch habitat, to plant milkweed. And here's just some examples of a few species year-round planting for monarch nectar. There's a couple of handouts in the back, and I'll just briefly summarize the handouts for you at the end, but we've got several lists of plants for you in the back. So we've got some good information for you back there as to what you can plant if you're looking.
Oh, sorry.
And then finally, you can help the monarchs by working with other people to help the monarchs. Get involved with some citizen science projects. Register your property as a monarch way station. Educate others. Put up some signs in your yard. When your neighbors ask, you can tell them what you're doing. They might get excited about it. One of Kay's and my neighbors is kind of getting excited a little bit about it, so it's working. I'll let Kathy talk about the avocados. I think that's it.
That's it.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you for your patience with the technology. Kathy?
No, and.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann. Got flustered.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I learned so much from that segment. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to Debbie as well. I learned a lot from these guys on our adventure. So just to tell you a little bit about how this all came to be, Debbie had the idea of going, and then she invited the rest of us to tag along. And we discussed our individual Spanish skills, and we decided collectively we did not have enough to cobble together, to feel comfortable enough to do this trip on our own. So Debbie started researching companies for us, and we decided on Natural Habitat Adventures. They are the travel arm of World Wildlife Fund. They're very established, and as you can see here, they do 100 nature adventures all over the world. The other thing that I think really impressed us about them is that conservation is is paramount to them. That's what they're about. So I was particularly impressed that Nat Hab was the world's first 100% carbon neutral travel company too. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Okay. So we arrived in Mexico City a day early so we could do some additional sightseeing. The morning we arrived, we started our tour out at the ancient Mesoamerican city of Teotihuacan. And in the afternoon, the four of us went to the Frida Kahlo Museum. And then Debbie and I slipped away and did a little shopping at the art market. So that was a lot of fun. So the text you see here, I lifted from the Nat Hab site, so it seems really complimentary to them, but we would agree with absolutely all of this because they were a fabulous company to travel with. I reordered the glowing things they say about themselves on the site to put our leaders at the top. We found them to be phenomenal. So Eric there on the left and Fernando on the right. Debbie snapped that picture on our third day, our third sanctuary visit when he was helping a group of school kids, and it was just very charming when she showed us these pictures. We really love getting to spend 3 days with the monarchs. A lot of tour companies have you spend 1 day. They have you have 3 different visits. We also enjoyed the accommodations, the small group size, the hospitality, and visits to cultural attractions. And at least 2 of the cities we visited were designated pueblos mágicos, magical towns. So our home base for visiting the monarchs was Angangueo, a lovely Pueblo Mágico village. It's about 3.5 hours west of Mexico City, and it's within the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve. Kathy's going to talk about this picturesque municipal seat here in just a little bit. So the Monarch Reserve has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2008. There are several sanctuaries that are open to the public, and each of them differ in accessibility, difficulty of hiking, location, the flora, and of course the monarch population. El Rosario is the largest and the most visited of the sanctuaries in the reserve, and we visited this site twice. So while there, you're cautioned to stay on the trails, not to bring food, and to avoid taking flash photos, and also to stay very quiet so we don't disturb the butterflies. Our time inside the sanctuary is also limited to prevent overcrowding. So we're going to see if we can play the little video in the center, and it's just a couple of seconds. You can see the butterflies moving just a little bit if it works.
Are we able to get to a little arrow down there?
I don't know. See the little arrow right here. Thank you.
This was actually taken
Yeah,
with
but
my
see, that's
camera
not playing.
By one of our guides. Let's see.
It's not, that's what I did.
There you go.
She made it work.
It's just so exciting to see them, and you know, this trip has been described as magical, and it absolutely was magical. So Sierra Chihuahua, like Lynn said, is the other sanctuary that we visited, and like El Rosario is about 30 minutes from Angangueo, our home base. For each of our visits, we rode horses, as you can see up here in the upper left-hand corner, part of the way, and then you hike the rest of the way. So while the season to visit monarchs is basically November to February, the Save Our Monarchs organization recommends visiting in November or December because the crowds are less and you can have a little bit more private experience. So I didn't know this until I was kind of looking up some of this information about what it would cost if you just walked up and paid a fee to go in. It's $5 for adults and it's $3 for kids in each of the sanctuary sanctuaries, and no reservations needed, but you have to go with a local guide. So we had a guide leading our horse. The second day, this particular visit to the Sierra Chinqua, I had a little girl who maybe was 6, 7, I don't know, she was quite young. And it was fun to watch Debbie ride the horses because she's not a fan. She's not a fan of horseback riding, and you would never know it. She was just the pro, and after she got, she goes, I don't like this at all. But we are just so appreciative, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. Kathy, where are you? There you are.
Play it again.
Oh, I have to say, Debbie is my hero because public speaking terrifies me. But I thought if Debbie can get on a horse, ride up a mountain, I can talk for 3 minutes. Short and sweet. Angangueo, there is a municipality and a town. The town is mostly, that was our home base. And since I don't have all of my notes, I'm gonna wing it. They're,
You can see them on here. if you want.
well, that might work. The town is actually Mineral de Angangueo, established 1792 in, Michoacan de Campo. The town has a population about 4,397 actually, and it is in the El Rosario and Chinqua reserves. The reserves are uphill. You ride in the back of a pickup truck and hang on for dear life. And you ride a horse up the mountain, and it was chilly, early spring-like weather. In Angangueo, let me just say, these aren't in my notes, the people were fabulous. People were so nice, so accommodating, and it's the best hot chocolate in the world. Only about a fifth of households have internet access. Only another fifth have phones. 4% have computers, 4%. But these folks are just, they're very poor, but you don't know it because they were so generous. And compared to us, I'm gonna try and not get on a soapbox, not a politician, but they're very, very poor compared to us. There's, let's see, the monarchs and tourists leave. This is the town. It's down in a valley, gorgeous little town. It was originally a mining town. It is in a high rugged mountains. The altitude is 8,461 feet. And it is about a 3.5-mile drive from Mexico City. It has what they call a spring-like, but like I say, early spring, because I was always cold. I'm freezing now. I don't know about anybody else. They, let's see, year-round climate. A lot of the places only receives rain in the summer. Part of it receives rain all year long. There are mostly pine, conifer forest, oyamels, and other mixed conifers such as cedar, and there's quite a bit of broadleaf, other trees. There are weasels, rabbits, squirrels, skunks, deer, and various birds. The economy of Angangueo. Again, these people are poor. Statistics here. They aggregate, once mining played out, that's how the town started officially, was mining. When mining played out, agriculture became more important to the economy. Today, it's at least a quarter of the economy, and corn and wheat are principal crops, along with barley and variety of beans. Other crops include fruits, apples, peaches, cherries, pears, and maguey, which is also agave. We'll be back to that. Increased production of maguey, avocados, and seasonal poinsettias may threaten the butterfly biosphere. These people are just trying to make a living. Who buys their stuff? We do. So that was the avocado. I'm certainly not saying don't eat avocados. Just be aware that the world doesn't revolve around us, so. Yeah, well, yes, it does. Okay. Livestock such as cattle, hogs, sheep, domestic fowl account for about 5% of their economy, and tourism accounts for a growing number of jobs. There's not a lot of statistics about exactly how much. It's growing, but it may not be enough. There continues to be some very limited mining of copper, zinc, lead, silver, and gold, little food processing, and some metal products. So, forgot to change. The employment statistics, agriculture, 9.3.8%, cultivation of fruit, 6.76%, construction, 4.5%, sales, dispatchers, others dependent on trade, 6.69%, store owners, 5.88%, domestic workers, 3.54%, truck drivers, cargo vans and cars, 2.39%, and primary school teachers, interestingly enough, at 1.24%. This is La Margarita, the hotel where we stayed. It was brilliant, brilliant, brilliant people, food. I just can't say enough of this. And there are many hotels there based on tourism for the butterflies. Let me see. Oh, I skipped something, but I'm not going back. Is ecotourism enough? Many believe tourism will offset the historic industries of logging and mining, which are potentially a threat to the monarchs. The Butterfly Biosphere Reserve is creating economic opportunity. There's private truck travel, hold on, reforestation, hotel industry, and travel to the top of mountains via horseback. Where's Debbie? Thank you, Debbie. Now, the bad stuff. Oh, the bad stuff is 2023 New York Times article, Americans eat 7 pounds of avocados per person a year in 2015. That was double the amount in 2008. 80% of the avocados come from Michoacan, which is where all the butterfly reserves are. And deforestation is accelerating. As one economist put it, just imagine if the Chinese start eating avocado. So, oh, that's the deforestation. It's awful. But oh wait, there is one more bad good thing. The agave, which is mezcal. I don't know, any tequila drinkers, mezcal. Mezcal has gotten extremely popular. So now they're clear cutting to grow agave so Americans can drink expensive bottles of mezcal. But there is some good news. Illegal logging within the reserve dropped from hundreds of acres in 2022 to 28 acres in 2023. Also, reforestation is taking place in the reserves and is a source of sustainable jobs. And more good news, I'm turning it back over to Lynn.
Thanks. I just want to say one quick thing here. Sources, more sources, further resources, not used for this presentation, but they're out there if you're interested. If you want this presentation, shoot me an email. I'm happy to share it with you. The handouts in the back are all from Leslie Cooper, the director of the Arkansas Monarch Conservation Partnership. And Leslie, with a tiny bit of help from me, produced a brand new handout this year, and you're getting, it hasn't ever been distributed before, you're getting a condensed version of it tonight. It's the native milkweeds in the state of Arkansas. It's a list of all 21, and photos, because you couldn't fit 21 photos in here, photos of a few of them. So that's also back on the table. And so, you know, before you go out to buy your plants, if you're looking for milkweeds, you can take this list. You will know which are native to Arkansas and which are not. And I think that concludes our presentation tonight, unless somebody has questions. Yes.
I have a question about taking the caterpillars and putting them into a net so they can be protected as they're growing in the system. Is that a good thing to do, or should we let them stay on the plants and do their?
I think that's a really hard question. I think if you look on the internet, it says they don't recommend doing that. And I think how you do it is also a consideration. I have gotten really tired of seeing my monarchs attacked by tachyiid flies and dying on the plants before they ever even get to the 5th instar. And so I vowed that this year, if I see any, I've got those screens. I'm gonna put them over the plants. I'm not gonna move the plants. I'm just gonna put them over the plants and try doing that. Hammer them into the ground so the wind doesn't blow them away. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The plant stays in the ground, the monarch stays on the plant. More than that, I don't know. Debbie, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Well, I would just say what I've read about harvesting your caterpillars and taking them inside to raise them contributes to disease, 1, and 2, there's some thought that it can actually produce a monarch that doesn't have that sense that Lynn talked about earlier of migration and how to find the route to Mexico. So, you know, I vowed I'm not gonna do it. It's also a lot of work. And so I'm just trying to build an ecosystem in my garden, and you know, if my caterpillars are eaten, I get upset, but I guess that's just part of the system, you know, that if you have enough checks and balances in a balanced garden, then your predators shouldn't get out of control. But yeah, I'm not a proponent for bringing them inside to raise them. And I did try putting a screen over a net over once, but it didn't work well. It's really hard to seal it around the ground because the fly is really little. But I hope Lynn is successful at it. She's probably gonna do a better job than I did.
Doubtful. Yes.
What are the screens? I've never seen them.
I know I bought mine, just to have a little plug here for 2 people in the room, at Wild Birds Unlimited, in the Heights. Are you still selling them these days?
Yes.
Okay,
We're not selling them. We probably got one of our real big ones.
I did get some big ones, yeah.
We've got smaller ones right now. Don't have to be the real big ones. But
Susan, I'll send you a photo of what I've got so you can see. They're collapsible, they're really great. They can be in my closet over the winter. Yes.
I've also used a mesh laundry hamper that folds up.
Ooh.
And it's like opaque sides, so you know, air passes through, sun gets in. So this was actually for black swallowtails that overran my fennel patch. So I moved them into the laundry hamper, still outdoors, bought some more fennel plants, and then the potted plants weighted down the hamper, and then I had just like tea towels clipped onto the top to keep things from
dive bombing in there for free snacks.
Yes.
But they did pretty well, and once they started hatching, all I had to do was remove the detail, they just left on their own, but they were exposed to the elements that way.
That's good advice. Thank you. Yes.
Then where's your list of native plant vendors? I was looking for them orders or papers.
I'm working on updating it right now, and I can also tell you that David Holcomb and I are working on a database of native plant vendors that's gonna be real specific about what pesticides do you use. We're gonna do the whole state, and it's gonna be posted on the CAM website next week, right, David? No, we haven't. We got a little behind with this project, but we vetted the questions by a whole bunch of people. Xerxes looked them over and made suggestions, so we're gonna be started on that. If you wanna shoot me an email, I'll send you the current list.
Okay.
But I did just send it out to the vendors for updating, so I'll send it to you after I get updates from them. Okay, other questions? Yes.
And I know that the travelers used a tour company that they felt very comfortable with. When I've just glanced at the state, the US government, recommendations for travel, for a long time, Michoacan, the state of Michoacan, along with 5 others, has been on the do not travel, and in fact, I just checked it again. It recommends that, or it states that government employees cannot travel, and they highlighted to the reserve of butterfly reserve in Michoacan. So could someone address kind of the safety, security, or was it just not, was it not a problem at all?
I'll take a stab at it, and then anybody else can contribute if they want to. But the first night.
Excuse me, is it possible to repeat the questions because the Zoom
Sure.
folks cannot hear what is being asked?
Sure, sorry. One question was about people have commented on how they protect caterpillars. One question was, do I have a current list of native plant sellers in Central Arkansas? And you can email me for that list. My email is on the screen. And then this last question is, the US government lists Michoacan as a very dangerous place and tells people not to travel to it. And did that bother us? We at least some of us talked about that before we went. I remember talking about it. I can't remember who, but the first night that we were at the hotel, our guide said, our number 1 concern is your safety. And we will do everything that possible to keep you safe. And we were out in the mountains in Angangeo, in Valle de Bravo, another little town in Mexico City. And I never felt the slightest bit unsafe. And I grew up in the big city of Chicago and have actually felt unsafe at times in my life, being in other places. Yeah, I mean, the warning is there, but nothing happened to us that disturbed us in the slightest, except Debbie and the horse. So.
The travel company that we were with advised us not to go out alone at night, and to not hail taxis from the street, but to only use taxis at our hotel secured for us. We only needed a taxi the first night when we got there early, because the company met us at the airport, took us to the hotel. So our hotel got us a taxi to dinner, and we just paid him to wait on us to have dinner, and then he took us back to the hotel. And then Ann and I did go to the ATM alone. It was across the street from the hotel, and it was evening. But when we told the guides we did that, they were like, "No, we're going with you." So then they went with us after that. So on a trip like this, you are cared for the whole time. So if we'd gone alone and been there longer alone, we could have gotten in trouble, I'm sure. But yeah, so those, the taxis off the street and then going to ATMs were the 2 things they warned us about.
But
I wouldn't have gone on the trip without the guides. So if it had just been us, I would have gone.
And I would have it, I'm so glad I didn't. It would have been an adventure for sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Were there many other tourists here when you were there?
So the question is, were there many other tourists there while we were there? Well, Mexico City is just full of tourists, yes. And the reserves also had other tourists. I gotta say, I feel bad for the people who hired a local guide to take them up, because the local guide guides you up there and that's about it. And then they stand and wait on you, a lot of them, until you're finished. Versus our guides who were teaching us 24/7. I mean, just every moment of the day. We so got our money's worth from them.
They helped us with our families.
Oh yeah, they also taught us photography too. And took us bird watching and told us what we were seeing. Okay, we've got some door prizes and then we'll let you go. All right.
In the odds forever be in your favor. Okay, the next door prize will go to 752. Yay! All right. You can leave it on the table then, and I'll respect it. All right, the next one up is 788. 788. Oh. Come on down. Take your pick. All right. Okay, the next gift goes to 761. 761. 761. Have to be present to win, so we'll go on to the next lucky winner, hopefully, is 793. All right, come on down. All right, the next one, 743. Oh, yeah. Go help yourself to whatever you would like over there. Okay, our next lucky winner is 737. Oh, it's yours. Fly on over there, 737. Okay, so the next one is 760. 760.
Yes.
760, okay. All right, how about 772? Hey, Tracy. All right. How are we doing here? Okay, several more things. 767. All right. Good deal. 768. Wow. The next one is 789. 789. All right. Hello, Cindy. I haven't seen you in forever. You too. Okay, 747 is the next one. All right, Dave. Cool. How many things do we have left there? Two more, okay. 795 is the next one. All right. Yeah.
No, check my number.
She's probably good. 776, I think is the last one. All right.
That's it. That's it. We got the
Thank you all so much for coming. Do we have any other announcements that you need to say? No? Now pick up resources, take a look at other things we've got sitting around.
Good job, you. Oh, man, technology. I'm glad we have people around who like are adept at it, because,